Dear students, welcome to session 41 of second BA optional English prescribed by the Mangalore University. This is Sumana Rajendra, Associate Professor, Department of English, Purna Prajna College, Udupi. Today, I am going to deal with the topic revision and important questions of the novel The Pickwick Papers by Charles Dickens. First of all, let us deal with the question analysis of the stages of moral development in the character of Mr. Pickwick. Charles Dickens in the novel proves that social justice is best served when one remains true to one's moral self. And this is proved by the character of the protagonist, Mr. Samuel Pickwick, in the novel. Mr. Pickwick is one of the greatest creations of Dickens. He is a romantic adventurer in the novel. He is the person who starts the Pickwick Club. It is through him that the plot moves forward. He acquires form and character as the novel progresses. Mr. Pickwick stands at the center of the novel in moral scenes. His spiritual and moral development is concluded from his actions. All his actions are directly connected to the plot, and the consequences of his actions have a bearing on his moral development. Mr. Pickwick is presented as a loyal and protective person towards his friends, and he's chivalrous and gallant towards women. He is forgiving and merciful towards persons who have treated him badly. He proves this in many occasions with evil characters like Alfred Jingle and Job Trotter. Dickens as a social critic in the novel. This is another question which we should deal with. Dickens partly presents society as a utopian and nostalgic vision of pre Victorian England. In fact, the novel is full of Dickens's characteristic social commentary. This is portrayed in the description of certain places like Eatanswill, where the famous election takes place. This is a commentary of how elections took place during that period. The description of the grim Fleet prison depict some of Dickens's perceptions with the condition of England. He wanted to portray the horrors of prison life, and he brings it through the description of Fleet prison. Dickens presents the deprivation of the lower classes in England through the inmates of the Fleet prison. He exposes the bad effects of the industrial society, including class division, poverty, sanitation, privilege, and aristocracy, and the experience of the metropolis. All this comes under the title Dickens How He Presents Himself as a Social Critic in the Novel. Now, let us see another question which has to be given equal importance. How does Dickens form a contrast between the world of good and evil in the novel? We have already discussed that contrast is a significant literary device which Charles Dickens has used in the novel. Contrast comes in various forms in the novel. Now, contrast between the good characters of Mr. Pickwick and Sam Weller with Bob Sawyer, Ben Allen, and Alfred Jingle, who are bad characters. So, there is a direct contrast when we look at the characters of these people. The near perfect Mr. Pickwick is in direct contrast to the brutal characters of the interpolated tales. It is not only that Pickwick is pitted against the bad characters in the actual plot of the novel, like Alfred Jingle and Job Trotter, we also have Mr. Pickwick proving to be in a direct contrast to the characters who appear in the interpolated tales, who are, which are almost all brutal characters. Now, let us look at the various father son relationships in the novel. One important feature of the novel is there are more male characters than female characters. In fact, this feature is very noticeable. It has a masculine quality. The father son relationship is treated as brutal and a kind of unending kind of warfare. This is very surprising. We have two important father son relationships which fall into this category. The first father son duo are Sam Weller and his father Tony Weller. The next is Nathaniel Winkle and his father Mr. Winkle Sr. Sam Weller, an affectionate boot cleaner who is engaged as a servant by Mr. Pickwick, who later becomes Mr. Pickwick's closest friend. Tony Weller, Sam's father, is a kindly irresponsible father who sticks to his son till the end. In fact, there is a contrast between the relationship of Nathaniel Winkle and his father and that of Sam Weller and his father Tony Weller. There's a direct contrast. Now, look, let us turn our attention towards the treatment of young women and middle aged women by Charles Dickens in the novel. Generally, all of Dickens's female characters display traits of goodness, evil, human clarity, and redemption. The main young women characters in the novel are Arabella Allen, Emily Warden, Isabella Warden, and Rachel Warden. Then we have a very pleasant character in the form of Mary, with whom Sam Weller falls in love with, but postpones his marriage to be in the company of Samuel Pickwick. There are a number of instances in which Mr. Pickwick finds himself in awkward and humorous situations, especially with women who are above the age of 30. He is very sympathetic with the young women characters of the novel. Almost all the women that we encounter in the novel seem to be fairly weak minded, unable to see facts, and extremely prone to fainting. Susan Weller, that is Tony Weller's wife, falls in love with a fake preacher. Arabella Allen's aunt, who is the guardian of Arabella, is shocked at her elopement. All these middle aged women are treated as pompous women and as artificial and posers. Now let us turn our attention towards the comical elements in the novel. Comedy in the novel is more than the use of humorous techniques. In fact, comedy is the dominant mode of the novel. Along with the main stream in the novel, we have the interpolated tales in the novel which add to the comical elements. Comedy is in the form of humorous satire also. Example of comedy, chapters describing Christmas celebrations at Dingley Dell, Sam Weller's chirpy Corey walking at the inn. Sam's father also is presented in a comical way, and we have Jingle talking with his staccato delivery. Let us look at the use of the interpolated tales in the novel. Now, the interpolated tales in the novel go parallel with the various themes used in the novel. We have characters in the novel narrating these interpolated tales. And most of these interpolated tales are examples of moral tales. In fact, they provide some superlative agents. They underscore the themes of the novel. The interpolated tales become so important that they reflect the action of the novel. These tales bear a relation to the larger themes of the novel. These tales also pose a contrast to the narrative process. The characters in this novel are in direct contrast to the character of the protagonist, Samuel Pickwick. The mood and the action of these tales are cruel, violent, and highly melodramatic. Interestingly, liquor becomes a source of alcoholic terror in these tales. The way these tales are narrated, it's almost nightmarish and creates a kind of grotesque atmosphere in the novel. The characters that appear in the tales are like beasts. Let us look at some of the interpolated tales in the novel. They are the Stroller's Tale, the story of the convict's return, a madman's manuscript, the bagman's story, the parish clerk, the old man's tale about the queer client, the story of the goblins who stole a sexton, and the true legend of Prince Bloodroot. We come to an end of the discussion of important questions. Now let us look at the questions which are connected to this session. First of all, we have someone who is one of the greatest creations of Charles Dickens in the novel. One of the characters. Who is it? Is it Samuel Pickwick? Is it Sam Weller, his friend? Or is it Alfred Jingle, the eternal villain? Or is it none of the above? Let's see. Well, the answer is Samuel Pickwick. We have a description of something in the novel that depicts some of Dickens's preoccupations. We have the description on one hand, the hellish description of the Fleet prison. We have the description of the festivities at Dingley Dell. We have also the comical and a combination of the comical and the horror in the interpolated tales, or is it none of the above? Well, let us look at the answer. The answer is the description of Fleet prison. And what was the preoccupation of Dickens in presenting the description of the Fleet prison? The preoccupation was Dickinson's association with the prison, where from a very young age he was associated with the prison because his father had been imprisoned for not paying a certain debt. One of the characters in this novel is a hard-headed businessman. Now, who is that? And this character appears in the father-son relationship. Is it Tony Weller? Is it Mr. Pickwick? Is it Mr. Pickwick Sr. or none of the above? Well, the answer is Mr. Pickwick Sr., the father of Nathaniel Winkle, who opposes the marriage of his son with Arabella Allen and finally agrees on the persuasion by Mr. Pickwick. We have a particular device which gives the novel a sense of reality. Is it comedy? Is it contrast? Is it dramatic technique or is it tragedy? Well, it is contrast. Contrast is a very important technique used by Charles Dickens in the novel. Every step in the novel we have contrast used. Let us see what is the last question related to this session. Dickens is often criticized for his sense of comedy, his use of the technique called contrast. Is it his use of weak female characters or his role as a social critic, that is his social criticism? Well, let's see what the answer is. So Dickens is often criticized for his weak female characters. It is said that his female characters, they fail to evolve. They remain the same. And there is not a single strong assessment of the female characters. He has always spoken of female characters as being weak. So this brings me to the end of this session. Thank you very much.